Gents, tonight I'm busting out these Saturdays are for the boys flag. And you may be asking why. I am a 25 and that shit should be beneath me at this point. However, given Pitt basketball's ranking in the AP poll, I'm feeling 18 again.
Who amongst us hasn't had a Saturdays are for the boy flag in their dorm room?
I really wanted to get the this is a throwback because they don't make this flag anymore. They did make a like Saturdays for the Victory Lights flag, I think when we were
Yeah,
freshmen,
yeah,
and they stopped selling it. And had they not, I would still probably own that.
yeah. Would you plant that flag in an opposing team's midfield? Because that
Should
happened
we
a lot this past weekend.
should we get into that? Because I have a take on that. Is you had 60 minutes to go beat them and prevent a flag planting. It is loser behavior. Especially in the situation of like I saw there were a bunch of them, but Ohio State was the big one when they lost to a 20-point underdog Michigan team. All you had to do was win against a 20-point underdog. Instead, you lost. They deserve to plant that flag, and you lost 4 times in a row. They have earned that.
Yeah, you're not going to hear an argument against that from me. I fully agree with everything you just said there. You don't like it, beat them on the field.
Yeah, especially like it's like Zach said, it's one thing if you do it in like a year where it's like a pick'em game, but Ohio State just literally fumbled the bag, and I think that like for where Ohio State fans are at, this game against Michigan is more important to them. Like, even if they go and win the national championship now, which I don't think they're going to, but even if they do, Michigan's going to hold this over their head. Like,
Oh, 100%. This is. I mean, we've seen some pretty bad Michigan teams in our lifetime. I think the COVID year doesn't count, but this is the worst Michigan team I've ever seen. Their quarterback had under 70 yards passing on the day. He is a Make-A-Wish quarterback, and he beat y'all. He
yep,
beat y'all.
tough weekend in Columbus.
Tough weekend in Columbus, but this is a Pittsburgh podcast, so let's get into that.
Yeah, we should have planted a flag at half court of the basketball right now.
Set the tone, baby.
Dude,
Suction cup flags.
Suction. That would be sick.
First down, goes to the sidelines, has a man wide
It reminds me of last year in the Garden against St. John. And guys just stepped up. Blake hits a what the hell three. You know, we're like, what are you doing? And he's done that all year.
Klicka out to Bizzario. It's over! The Pitt Panthers have upset Wisconsin. Anybody if he hits his field goal. Up and got it! Sauls does it again!
Hey everybody, welcome back to Simple 5 Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Kaminsky. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Mason Kling and Kent Vanderwood. We're back. We're here to talk about a lot of good in Pitt sports and then one sort of open wound, and I think you can guess which is which. But before we get into that, Mason, how are we doing tonight?
Doing well. I feel like I'm still riding on a high from basketball, despite football's efforts to bring us down. I'm still in a positive light. So ready for a good pod.
Yeah, super high in basketball. Volleyball is fucking rolling. I will say we're gonna talk football. I might have a bit of a cope speech ready, but I don't think. Listen, it sucks, but I have some cope for that. Kent, how you doing tonight?
I still can't believe how sick that win was versus Ohio State in basketball. So still riding high on that.
Love that.
I love the pun. Did you have that ready? How long ago did you get that ready?
About 5 seconds before you cued me in.
That's hey man, it fucking works. Okay. Before we talk football and basketball, I do want to give a huge shout out to the Pitt volleyball team. Now, I'm going to do a volleyball specific episode coming out later this week with some friends of the show who've been on before to talk tournament, to talk season at large, but to kind of give the highlights from the last week. Pitt finished the regular season with a 30-1 regular season record, 29-1, 30 if you count the preseason game, which you don't count. And then a bunch of awards came out tonight. The entire starting lineup was all ACC, whether that was first or second team. Ryla Jones was on the all freshman team, who was their second middle blocker. Dan Fisher, coach of the year, and Olivia Babcock, simplified guest. They're calling it the simplified guest bump because she was the ACC player of the year. So to any enterprising Pitt athletes out there, if you come on our show, we've got a track record here. We're 1 for 1. We're batting 1,000. Now, given all that, they're the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. They'll be playing all of their games at the Peterson Event Center, so that's going to be a crazy-ass environment for all those games. And the postseason starts this weekend coming up, so if you're by TV, get it on because it is a fun time to watch. And if you're in the city, make sure you go to those games because it will be the best thing happening this weekend as Pitt basketball is away. We'll get into that later. Shout out to volleyball. Let's talk football. They did it. They managed to do it. They lost 5 in a row. They went 0-5 in November. They lost 34-23 against Boston College to end a huge slide. Now, I'm of two minds here. I'm going to present you the two options here. Obviously, 7-5 from where they were, 7-0 at the end of October, coming off a huge win against a rival Syracuse, so they just totally dominated them, is going to be disappointing. Nobody really saw this happening. There were a couple of very disappointing losses in the middle of that, especially to Virginia. But if I'm being realistic, I think that 7-5 was probably the upper bound of my expectations for this team coming into the year. And given all the circumstances and situations and the injury luck that they had to deal with, I wish they would have gotten one of those two games against Virginia or Clemson, but, they didn't. I don't think this is an indictment on the Cade Bell offense or the coaching staff. I just think that they kind of overachieved early in a rebuilding year and then came back down to earth. Gents, what's your take on this?
Yeah, you saw in the game. I mean, I didn't watch a ton of it, but what I did catch very much seemed, like you said, an injury-stricken team. We're playing with a lot of people that haven't played together, haven't really been a cohesive unit, and as success, we just kind of lost some of the magic. It was whenever I feel like those first 7 games of the season were all such emotional wins. Every single, pretty much, except for a couple of FCS ones, were all super emotional ones. We just ran out of gas a little bit. I think that's the perfect way to put it, Zach.
Yeah, and Kent, before you go, I will say to just talk on the injury stuff. Obviously, Eli was out this game. Desmond Reed was kept out of this game with an injury. Derek Davis was hurt early in this game, so it was really just Jules Goff all day. The O-line was on their fifth starting combination in 6 games. They benched their starting right tackle at halftime, and then they re-put him back in the lineup because the other guy wasn't working out. Winning a lot of games like that, and the only real thing I want to hit on in this game, because it was just a chore to watch, is that I truly believe that Nate Yarnell is one of the quarterbacks who does the most with the least in college football. He was getting no help. He was getting mauled all day, as he has been the last 4 games. The O-line's not giving him any help. He still threw 3 touchdowns, threw for almost 300 yards on the day. If there is one good thing to see in this game, it is that Nate Yarnell truly is a hard dick warrior. He's out there balling, even though he is getting beaten up every play. I'm sad that none of that translated into wins, whether that was Saturday against Boston College or against Virginia or Clemson. I think Clemson was probably his best game of the year, but I don't know. Like you said, they ran out of magic. Also, they had some lucky bounces early in the year, and they had some very unlucky bounces late in the year. And when you compile that with an offensive line that was breaking down as the season went on, you have your right tackle learning left tackle on the fly. It's not a good mix.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of points made by both you guys. Obviously, to start 7-0 and to finish 7-5 and 10th in the ACC is pretty tough to swallow. Especially, the last game that the three of us went to was Clemson, had a real chance to pull that one out. Really had a lot of chances against Virginia. I think, I don't know, if you pull out at least one or two of these games, finish with 9 wins or so, it would be a little bit better feelings here at the end of the season. But hey, we're bowl bound. Like you guys said, injuries tallied up for us, and we just couldn't quite get over the hump. It seemed like after the loss to Clemson, Louisville just kind of stomped on us. The boys kind of, I don't want to say they gave up, but it was just not a lot of the same fight that we saw early in the season.
I don't think that they gave up, really. Like, with Louisville, and I'll kind of, this might sound a little, like, I think Louisville was just generally a better team than us this year. And you saw it. I think they had a graphic in the game where, like, Pitt was projected 13th in the ACC standings in the preseason. And 10th is, a little bit of an overachievement, but you have to think of where this team was last year. It was a 3-9 dumpster fire, totally new offense, and totally rebuilding. Like we said, our preview show back in August with me, Mason, and friend of the show, Steven, I was like, I don't have a prediction for this team. I think that a bowl berth is possible. Now they matched that expectation. They just happened to set new ones and then failed to reach the ones they set in the middle of the season. Overall, I do think that this, I don't know if I would call this season a success, but I think it was a step in the right direction because this team was in a total tailspin last year. Nothing went right. And to fire OC, who everyone knew was cooked. I think the Bell offense works. They just kind of have to bolster the line, get that second running back they didn't have all year. I mean, Des Reed's awesome, but like his body did not hold up for being a bell cow back, and that's just because he's tiny. It's. I think that this team is in a very good spot moving forward, just schematic wise, personnel wise. Like I said, not a success based on how the season started, but you have to look at the wins where you got them. You're in a bowl. You went 3-0 in rivalry games against Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Syracuse. And even though your team was battered and bruised, you still had a legitimate chance at taking down ACC title contender Clemson. Would have been nice to have that game, but with everything piled up against you, the fight was what I like to see in that game. And even in this game, when they were down 2 scores, they were still fighting. I don't know.
I'm excited for an off season. More time to bring in some Cade Bell stuff.
Yep.
Hit the transfer portal pretty hard. Get healthy again. Next year, we're not going to be as under the radar. I think we'll get a little bit more respect. So we'll have a little bit higher expectations, but hoping that we can, stabilize things a little bit here in the off season and get back to 10, 11 win team, because I think that the pieces are there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said as well. I mean, I think if you had asked me before the season if I'd rather be 7-5 with a win against West Virginia or 9-3 with a loss against West Virginia, I'd probably say the first one. I'm so glad that we won that game.
Yeah.
Syracuse, honestly, that's a really impressive win looking back. Syracuse finished 9-3, just knocked off Miami. So, like you said, some really good wins this year. Some disappointing losses. Almost a really big win against Clemson. Would have knocked them out of the ACC championship. Pretty disappointed that they're in that. But like you said, kind of big picture before the season, none of us really expected 7-5 to be necessarily realistic this year. We were hoping for maybe 6 wins in a bowl, but 7-5. If you told me that before the year, we would have all probably taken that. So,
Yeah, totally agree. I think that listen, they're gonna play in some mid-tier Tuesday bowl probably, which is fine. They're not gonna get a Premier Bowl billing this year. Would like to see at least after a month off, get healthy, get guys right. Maybe get that O line working together just to see like maybe return to form in the bowl game, probably against a lower tier opponent, just based on our record. Um, Immediate needs in the offseason. I kind of got to this earlier, but you got to bolster the O line. And I think really one of the more important things for this team is to get uh, a running back complementary to Desmond Reed. They need someone to give him breaks in the game, someone who is like just better than Derek Davis and Rodney Hammond have been this year. And then I think the other thing is that they need to get that like killer D end. I think that was probably the one thing that was missing from this defense this year. And I don't know. I'll probably think about this more, but off the top of my head, that's probably where they need to focus in the portal. And I think that for all the news about how like every offseason is like how Pitt loses a player, this staff has been really, really good at adding players in the right positions in the portal. That's one of their strengths, I believe. So, yeah, I think the 7-5 finish sucks. The 5 straight losses does suck. I will never, ever fucking post again about how Narduzzi is good in a month because I'm convinced that fucking cursed the team. They went 0-5 after I said they were, I think he was 21-12 going into this year. So, hand up, that's also my fault. It was the post, it was the slow cooker, it was all the things in my control. But I'm just trying to say, I think that this staff has proved something. I think that, one, they proved that last year was a fluke. I think they have the talent, the ability, and the coaching chops to be good in this league. And it just so happened that things really outside their control in terms of injuries hampered the team. And, at the beginning of this year, we were uneasy going into the year. And I think that the most important thing is that we now have I have the most hope and good vibes I've had with this team since going into 2021 with a 5th-year quarterback and that super veteran defense. Like the defense is going to get more veteran. They're going to get a safety in the portal probably, but there's hope, there's good vibes, and I think things are looking up. I do not think that this is a downward slide that's going to continue because the team's only going to get healthier.
yeah, one question for you guys. We've talked a lot about additions in the portal. Are you guys worried about a lot of exits?
History would tell us that one big player might leave in the portal. They've had a couple of late flips out of the recruiting class. One was Elijah Dotson to Michigan. They started dropping bags. He's a local Michigan guy. His quarterback also flipped to Michigan from the same high school, which I think you kind of, as Pitt, who's famously a not that wealthy school in terms of like bag dropping, you're not going to compete with what Michigan's doing. They also had a wide receiver flip from them to Missouri today. I think you're always going to lose one person.
It's kind of inevitable.
I don't think it's worth it to try and guess on who that is. Like, optimistically, I think a lot of these guys are going to be back because they have a lot to prove at this school.
The good news about not having a lot of big names is that I think a lot of people overperformed in this defense and in this offense and gives them a better chance than going to, I don't know, a typical level of school, but maybe pays them like a little bit more. I think that for a lot of the guys that we have, I don't want to say it's like their best spot, but it gives them their best shot to develop here as opposed to a lot of other places. So will we lose some guys? Probably, but I'm not like, I think the potential at the beginning of the season is going to be enough to keep some of the pieces around.
Yeah, even last year, Hayes and Okunlola transferred out, and then Jimmy Scott stepped up and had a crazy ass season. Sincere Edwards came in as a true freshman, performed at the DN position, and even with that, they still kept Gavin Rodney, who's going to have a bigger role before the season. They kept Kanade Mupfield, they kept Kenny Johnson. Like they were able to keep those guys even after a terrible 3-9 season. And now that they went 7-5, and I think a lot of these guys think they have so much more to prove based on what they left on the table this year. I think they're hungry. I think they're going to want to come back and play in this offense that showed that they can fucking score with the best of them when they're on. Before we move on, I do want to give a shout out. Kanate Mumfield had an awesome game against Boston College. 8 catches, 144 yards, and a touchdown. Then Gavin scored 2 touchdowns in this game. I believe that brings the season total to 4. Even though we lost, I'm very glad to see those 2 guys playing in their final game in a Pitt uniform, getting the score, kind of going off. The shovel pass touchdown to Gavin was sick. That was a really cool play design.
Vintage Narduzzi.
Facts. He called up Matt Canada and was like, hey, send me something on your phone real quick. Yeah, but that's football. It was a good season of good and bad, and we will see you for the bowl game to talk about that whenever that. I guess that's announced next week or something. I don't know.
Yeah, Selection Sunday, I think, after all the conference championships. Was doing some research here before the pod, and they got us all over the place in these bowl projections. So we'll see what happens.
Anyone stand out to you?
They had one of them was the Pinstripe Bowl. Hate to say it. A lot of Holiday Bowl and Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa. A couple others as well that are escaping my mind because they're just so obscure. But that's bowl games.
Yeah, I think Pinstripe Bowl would suck. Another cold weather game. Holiday will be fun because that's the one in Petco Park in San Diego.
I believe it's in San. Yeah.
That'd be kind of sick.
They usually send like a better ACC team to that one. I'm unsure, but
they also one of them was in the Sun Bowl, which I was like, we can run that back, I guess.
I mean, maybe I don't know. I guess they do like picking us there. It's a very cool stadium. I love the fact that's the CBS Bowl because they do a really good job on the broadcast there. I would not be unhappy with that one. So,
yeah, saw us against anybody like Nebraska, Michigan, Tulane, Washington would be the Holiday Bowl. So some potential like cool matchups too that we wouldn't. Obviously, it's teams you don't normally play, but to get Michigan or Washington in a bowl game is, I don't know, something.
They're calling it the Mario and Wario of the Big Ten. All right. You guys ready to talk hoops?
Yes, sir.
We're going to get to the game, but we do got to talk about I think the bigger news here. Pitt debuted at number 5 today in the NET computer ranking that the NCAA uses, which is, I believe, I would have to assume their highest ranking ever. And they also debuted in the AP poll at number 18. It is their first time in the AP poll, I believe, since, I think in 2 years, I want to say, and their highest ranking in nearly a decade. So, I think we're finally getting the respect this team deserves.
Yeah, it's good for sure. Good to have this good of recognition and visibility early on, I would say. Gets more eyes on us as the season progresses, where last year I think we really didn't get enough eyes on us until it was a little bit later in the season to really just get the respect that the team deserved. So it's really, really good to be where we're at this point.
Yeah, 5 in the net is just ridiculous. I know that we talked about Ken Palm and where we stood there a couple times in the pod before, but I didn't think we were going to be that high. But I think that's probably like the most use. Like every time you hear about Lenardi or some bracketologist talking about the bracket, like they're talking about the quad 1, quad 2 wins. Um, so to be ranked that high in a system that a lot of people kind of use pretty well to project things, I think is huge, and I'm glad the computers like us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, Zach. It helped us as well. West Virginia, who the Panthers just smacked by 24 points, ended up beating Gonzaga and Arizona this week as well. So, overall, Pitt's resume is looking better and better.
Yeah, and you were talking about like quad 1, quad 2. I mean, the net rankings here, I think, are really showing the difference in scheduling philosophy that Pitt has had this year. They're already 3-1 in quad 1 games. That LSU win will to be determined on if that stays a quad 1 game, but could dive early on. It's probably gonna be a quad 2 at minimum. And I mean, Ohio State is a very good team. We saw that on Friday. What was I going to say? Oh, I want to go back to what you were saying earlier about we didn't get eyes on us until later last year, and I think the time where we got a lot of eyes on us was after the Duke upset, where we go into Cameron Indoor and beat them. And I was listening to this podcast that Jeff Capel went on today, and he actually explained that last year Jalen Lowe was injured, and no one really told anyone about it until January, and that lines up with Pitt actually um, starting to play better. Was when Jalen Lowe actually was healthy last year. But all that to say, the scheduling, their performances. I mean, you can schedule as hard as you want. You got to beat the teams, and they have. And let's talk about this. Pitt's 91-90 overtime win in Columbus, beating Ohio State. Ohio State, who is also a very highly ranked team in Ken Pom. This game was a very impressive showing because, first off, Pitt battles down from down 11 at halftime, comes back, wins it in overtime. It's a war in the second half. And I guess we'll start with now this first game without Damian Dunn as a starter. They put Deli in as the third guard. I still think he's still playing a little bit too loose with it. He is very prone to turning over the ball, but I think the breakout star of this game has to be Papa Kante.
Yeah, got a ton of good minutes from Deli. The more he comes back from his hand injury, the more he seems like he's going to be a fine role player. Looked a little bit better on the defensive end today too, or on Friday as well. But yeah, Papa Kante coming out party was fun to see.
Yeah, no, he really stepped up when we really needed him to. Cam Corden didn't play a lot, was in foul trouble for much of this game, so Cable was kind of forced to take him out. I think Guillermo got hurt. So it was next man up, and Papa Conte came in and gave some really, really good minutes and really helped us pull this one out. So I think he finished with 12 points, 4 rebounds.
Yes. All of those rebounds, by the way, offensive rebounds. Just want to make a note of that. Yeah, he was making his presence felt on the interior of that court in the paint. I think that in last week's show, me, Mason, and Ian were talking about how they need to find that third guy to spell Guillermo and Cam down low. And frankly, they found that guy. Papa, 17 minutes off the bench, 3 of 4 from the field, 6 of 9 from the stripe, which was huge. They were just fouling him all day because they couldn't stop him. Now he fouls out. Granted, it's his first time seeing action against a top 40 team, I would say. But he was so huge. He was really the reason that they started that comeback from down 11 to even get it to overtime. And we really even haven't talked about sort of the biggest the biggest hero in this game. That's Zach Austin. Now, this year has been sort of an off year for Pitt. They have not been shooting the three ball well. And this continued in this game, except for Zach Austin, who goes 5 from 8 from downtown. And the shot heard around the world. The buzzer beater to beat them in overtime. Jalen Lowe hits him on the trail and just sends Ohio State fans home sad. It was absolutely electric.
It was also super great to see. I believe it was Micah Parrish for them who hit the. I can't. I think it was. I don't remember if it was in overtime or right before.
2 minutes left in the fourth.
2 minutes left in the fourth. He hit us with the
Good night.
sleeping. He hit a three and hit the sleep on us. And whenever somebody does that, it's always great to have a buzzer beater right in your face, and then Zach Austin doing an even better celebration than he did.
Yeah, I love the little squat and shimmy. They did call out the celebration on the broadcast. They were like, "There's a lot of time left in this game," and I think you got to know you got to know down and distance right there. You're hitting the sleep, and there's 2 minutes left, and I think they're only up 4 at that point. That was a mistake. That was teach tape in the celebration game. You cannot be hitting the sleep if you don't have the victory locked up.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of unconscious. Like he didn't miss a three all game. I'm pretty sure he was 4 for 4.
Yep.
So I'm sure that's his excuse, was that's why he was doing that celebration. But I don't know. I think it might have fired the players up a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jalen Lowe still not. He went over from 3. He hasn't necessarily been shooting the ball well deep, but he goes 10 for 11 from the free throw line, which is huge in this game. Tied it up also with a mid-range jumper to send it to overtime. So obviously a really good game from Lowe as well. I think he got fouled on a couple 3-pointers to help us also get the game into overtime. Knocked down the free throws when he got to the stripe. Like, he was also huge.
Yeah, I think the 3-point shooting will come eventually for Lowe. It's still early in the season. I don't think he's going to continue just going over. But, Ish and Lowe in this game really just showed their versatility, especially with getting to the rim and hitting those mid-range jumpers. Like, we haven't had I think one of the things about Pitt teams in the past couple years, they've been very much too dependent on the three ball. And at times I think they still are. They still think they're those shooters, they are. But this team also knows when to not take a three. They know when to drive to the rim, and Jalen Lowe is so good at getting fouled. Like you mentioned, he was 10 of 11 from the charity stripe. He was on one. And him and Ish, I think they just have this like presence about them where if they know the game's getting out of hand, they know they can get to the rim, get some points, reset the team, and get everyone's head back in the game.
They were getting the basket at will. It was awesome to see, because there were some frustrating stretches where, I mean, Ohio State shot the lights out. They shot over 50% from 3, over 50% from the field, which is kind of what propelled them to that early lead. But
Yep.
we had Ish and Jalen Lowe that just whenever it would get a little bit out of reach, they would come down and get a big, huge bucket, huge layup, or get fouled, and just got to that point where if you let us hang around for too long, like, we're going to find a way to get scrappy at the end of the game and make things work. And that's exactly, they kind of weathered the storm against Ohio State, and it worked out for them.
Yeah, I loved just the overall fight in this team. A lot of teams down 11, or Pitt teams even from past years. I don't know if you, even as a fan, have the belief that they have a chance to come back and win. This year it's different. I know when I was watching, I was like, I never felt I never felt out of it. I never felt like I kept the confidence the whole time that, this team has my full confidence that they have the ability to come back and win the game. So you can just feel that the team also believes that, and they believe that the whole time, and they got it done. So
Yeah, and I mean, they did all that without Damian Dunn. I think that was something that cannot be understated, is that they were running out guys in this game that really have not had a ton of minutes as starters. Like we said, Delhi, I think he's coming into his own still. I think he can still be really good. I think he has turnover problems. He's got to stop just giving the ball up, trying to do some crazy ass hero step. But I mean, outside of that, he still was pretty good. I think I like to see Delhi a little bit. I like to see him take better 3-point attempts. I think there were times where he gave up open threes, tried to do something else, and then he took some ones that weren't as good. But I mean, he's coming into his own. Papa Kante being revealed as that third big guy. So yeah, like, it was Jorge, but I think it's clearly Kante now moving forward. I think maybe he got a slow start just because he was coming off a knee injury, but this was a coming out party for him, and it really couldn't have come in a better time because they've got Mississippi State coming up. Unless you guys have anything else on the Ohio State game.
No, only other point I'll say is I think that also kind of goes back to we spoke on the depth of this team coming into the season and how much more depth and how this is the deepest team that we think Capel's probably ever had. And I think this game really spoke to that when, kind of going back to what I said before, especially when you would lose a starter or two to foul trouble, you didn't have a ton of confidence in the guys coming in to replace them necessarily in years past. Now it's like, all right, next man up. I think that guy's just as good as the guy that went down. We have the ability to still win even with some starters going down with foul trouble or injury or whatever it may be. So it's a fun team to watch, and they play for each other, and you can tell. So
Yeah, really well put. And I think that I didn't even think the team was as deep as it was going to this game as I left it. Like I cannot overstate how important it is that Kante showed himself to be a viable option as a backup center. Because while I think Jorge has his moments as a 3-point guy, he might be the worst defender on the team. And I don't want to say that's hate. That is constructive criticism. I think they left this team, or they left this game even deeper than they were coming in, and they were down a starter. So gritty win, like you said. We believed in them. They believed in themselves, and like don't let it go to your head. But that's a super important thing. It's like even when you're down against a top 40 team, they just kept fighting. And like you said, it was Ish and J-Lo getting to the dish just to settle everybody down. It was Kante down low. It was Zach Austin with the big threes off the bench. Like, this is going to be a dangerous team, but they do have a couple of pretty big tests coming up this week. On Wednesday, they go to Mississippi State for a 9:15 p.m. tip. I'll be honest, I probably watch 30 minutes of that game before I have to go to bed. But then they get a Saturday game at Virginia Tech, 2 o'clock. They're playing in Castle. That is an arena that is historically unkind to Pitt basketball. So let's talk Mississippi State first. They're coming off a loss to Butler, a 10-point loss to Butler. Now, they've been scoring higher than I expected them to. They're scoring in the 80s most of the time. The last time we saw this team, they were playing terrorist rock ball in the NCAA tournament. I believe they still play that style of basketball. But this is a game I think you have to have. I don't think you can lose this one.
yeah, I mean they're a good team. They're 6-1. They're technically they've gotten some votes in the AP poll this week. They're technically I think 42nd in the AP poll voting. So it's not a bad team, and it's not going to be an easy win by any means. But if hopefully Pitt can play well, pull it out, and that's another pretty quality win to add to the resume if they're able to get the job done. So very good opportunity in front of the Panthers. And if we can go into ACC play, at 8-1 for our first ACC matchup at Virginia Tech, I'm feeling pretty good. So
Yeah, I mean, they were ranked in the week 4 AP poll. So
Correct.
Huge win, or huge potential win. Would be another, what we, for sure, because since we're on the road here, would most likely finish up as the end of the year as a quad 1 win. And just another, now that Pitt has that little tiny number next to their name, we're going to get more eyes on us. People are going to be watching these games. So now we have the respect. We got to kind of work on keeping it, I should say. And this is the perfect opportunity to kind of prove we're deserving of that number 18.
Yeah, I am interested in seeing how they react to getting more eyes on them. I mean, the national coverage sort of ramped up, starting with the LSU win, the fairly close Wisconsin loss on a neutral site. Obviously, the huge buzzer beater generated a ton of buzz against Ohio State. I'm interested to see how like they mentally react to getting that attention, getting that number next to their name. It's something that the other big sport for Pitt did not respond to well this year. But it's going to be a pretty raucous home environment. Like Ohio State was bumping on Friday. Mississippi State is going to be loud. It's going to be electric. I believe it is a blackout game for them as well. So it's probably going to look really cool on TV. I just kind of wish it wasn't a 9 o'clock tip. But like you said, this is a huge opportunity. You're most likely going to get a quad one game out of this just being on the road. The SEC is a very, very deep league. It's just a matter of, I think they just got to continue doing what they do well. Hopefully they shoot three a little bit better. But I think really if they can improve a little bit defensively sort of over these next couple of games, that's what I really want to see. I know that Ohio State was shooting the lights out. And I think some of that was just they were unconscious. But I think they were playing really good defense through the LSU game. The quality of competition stepped up in the last two. I kind of want to see what kind of defensive team this is. Like, are they the team that was in the first 6 games or the last two? And I don't think they were playing bad defense in the last two, but I want them to step it back up to what we saw early. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Also, just noticed Mississippi State actually received one more AP poll vote than Ohio State, so they're just ahead of Ohio State in terms of the voting. So pretty good comparison if you look at it that way. So we got a tough game ahead.
What are they in the NET? I gotta look this up. So Ohio State is 12 in the net. And Mississippi State is 28. Now, that's sort of based on schedule. So let's pull up our old friend Ken Palm, your friend of mine. Pittsburgh currently 13 in the trusty Ken Palm rankings, and Mississippi State also number 28. They're, if nothing, consistent.
Yeah, but to go off your point also, Zach, yeah, the defense against Ohio State was really poor for a lot of the game. Obviously, Ohio State was shooting the lights out, including well beyond the arc, especially in the first half. Yeah, they got some stuff they definitely have to clean up. They can't defend like that and continue to expect to win games. It's not always going to work out like it did, but watch some film, get Capel and his assistants hopefully clean some things up in practice ahead of this one on Wednesday. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my question to you is then, I think that the defense wasn't great against Ohio State. How much of that do you attribute to like them just, and like Mason, you and me were watching most of this game. I feel like that while they were kind of playing poor defense, a lot of it was more attributable to the fact that Ohio State just couldn't miss.
Yeah, I think it's always a little bit of both, right? But I think those two factors partnered with the fact that things were a little whistle happy there, and we also got in some foul trouble.
Yes.
Granted that like Cam Corrin didn't play a good amount of the first half, or the second half really, but that did give us Pop Kante. But still, it was like a large portion of the second half they were getting 2 free throws at a time. So I think that's been a kind of reoccurring thing as well, and we need to work on that, is playing good defense without fouling too. Because even though we're deep, it still puts us in a tough spot. So yeah, I think those were kind of the 3 things that led to this high-scoring game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you mentioned the fouls. Also, the Kante, it might have been a curveball for Ohio State. I think they might have not been ready for him to play, but I think he does give us a better defensive presence than Guillermo does, which I think is going to be huge moving forward, especially for playing. I think he has to learn not to foul because he fouled out in 17 minutes in the second half, all in the second half. You're right. Fouls have to be a point of emphasis moving forward, especially with Cam Corrin. You just notice it when he's off the court. They just don't have as much on defense, and it shows. And that's just how good of a player Cam Corrin is.
yeah, you could tell. I mean, as soon as Corin was out of the game, especially in the first half before Kante came in, like they were just basically getting whatever they wanted at the rim, as well as hitting some deep shots. So overall, it was just poor defensively. We were kind of matching bucket for bucket a little bit, but that's not gonna, it seemed like I was getting frustrated watching the first half. Not just the shots beyond half court, but just even when they would not hit a three or a tough shot or a tough jumper, we were just giving up way too easy looks after a bucket ourselves. So kind of a mixture, I would say.
It was just one of those games where it was like, we get a stop, we have a good possession on defense, but they still jack a three. And like they weren't taking good 3-pointers and making some of them. So there were like a couple good possessions. I think we do, like we have all said, need to be a lot better. But yeah, there were some not Blake Hinson level threes, but they were jacking a little bit.
Yeah, they were feeling themselves from deep. I will say, I think one other thing I want to sort of put a pin in is that Pitt got into the bonus very, very early in the first half. And I think they played bad situational basketball being in the bonus. They did not take a lot of drives to the rim once they were in the bonus. They did not get a lot of free throws in the first half. I think that's something where you have to know the number of fouls you have. And if the other team already has 10 fouls, drive to the rim, because either they're going to foul you and you have a chance at 3-point play, or they're going to play conservative and let you score, vis-a-vis John Tanji in the Wisconsin game. That's just something you have to know. If like the threes aren't landing, just drive. You have two insanely good driving guards. You have three bigs who are really good off the pick and roll. Like, I think that's something that is just situational awareness. I think that comes as growing with a team, a lot of new pieces, and like guys who are stepping into bigger roles. But I think that's something that I want to see. If they have a foul advantage in this game, I want them to press it, because you saw what a team like Wisconsin did with foul advantage, and it ended up killing Pitt in the Greenbrier championship game. I think that's what really good teams do, is when they know they have an advantage and they know they have a like an efficiency, they push it.
Agreed. That's a great call.
Yep, I agree with that as well.
You guys have anything on Virginia Tech basketball? They are 3-4. They have not beaten a power conference team, I believe. Their wins are over Delaware State, USC Upstate, and Winthrop, and they lost to Jacksonville at home. However, the Castle Coliseum is cursed, and so it will be a rock fight. I just know it.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not nearly as strong of a team or program as they have been. In previous years, they have had a lot of turnover. But like you said, that's always a tough place to play. It's always a really good environment down in Blacksburg. So it's not going to be an easy win, most likely, just due to that. So
yeah, one step at a time. But if we handle business against Mississippi State, and regardless of that result, if they like make it look easy in Blacksburg, I feel like my already high levels of confidence in this team are just going to go up, because of the noted like history in that arena where we just can never win.
I think what'll really sell it for me this year is if we beat Clemson, because we also can't beat them.
That is also
Never.
true.
We never do.
Well, the issue is they're still pretty good. Slight problem. What's their?
Yeah,
what's
they
their
are. So they're not ranked, but they're not far out of it. Yeah, they got 25 votes in the AP poll. So yeah, I mean they're a good team. They're a good program. They're projected ahead of us in the preseason AP poll as well. So I mean that game's not for a while. We can circle back to that, but just a little side note.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, also, I think another thing I'm looking at here is that, like, I think the ACC, it was going into the year, people thought it was a pretty weak league. It looks like the ACC might be a little back. You got
Yeah.
Duke. UNC's been a little inconsistent. They're 4-3, but they have some of like the best wins in the country, but some really weird losses. Florida State, Clemson, Wake Forest doing well. SMU and Cal are doing pretty well in their first year in the league. Even Stanford 6-2. Now, granted, it's very early to be. I'm thinking in terms of football record here, but this does look like a pretty deep conference, honestly.
Yeah, I mean it's a gauntlet, regardless of if it's a down year for the ACC, like all the experts are saying. Like it's still, in my opinion, one of the better leagues in the Power Five. So we'll have plenty of battles throughout the season, but I don't look at anywhere on the schedule now after these past couple games and see a team that we can't beat.
Totally agree. All right. I think that's going to do it for tonight. Next week, friend of the show, Mike, will be joining us to talk more hoops. Sort of, it's that time of year. We love to have him on talking hoops with all of us. And like I said at the top of the show, later this week you can expect a volleyball centric episode in your feed with some friends of the show who cover volleyball around the clock. Now, this has been Simplified Podcast. I've been your host, Zach Kaminsky. Thank you for listening. If you liked it, follow us on Twitter at SimplifiedPod, and we'll see you next time.
Hail to Pitt.
Beat the Bulldogs and Hokies.